I thought I'd speak a little bit this evening about the current state of affairs in the world and how we can respond. So the basic truth is there's a crisis that's happening, and we have a choice whenever we face a crisis. I've seen the whole gamut of responses this last couple weeks, from people being clueless, to people ignoring it, to people just panicking and buying ridiculous amounts of food, or I mean, the big funny one is toilet paper. I mean, it's just been wild, and I think our whole world is being told that it's best if we stay home and not interact with each other. But of course, we're humans, we're relational creatures, we want to interact. I was out earlier today at a birthday party, and I went to just reach to shake someone's hand who I was meeting for the first time, and they kind of pulled themselves back from me like I had the plague. And it's funny, it's just a funny situation in our life right now. My daughter, my oldest daughter got sent home from college, just told to stay home the rest of the semester. I mean, schools are being canceled. It's getting really really uncomfortable for a lot of people as we go through these changes. And so the great question for us as spiritual beings, as awake beings on planet Earth, is how can we respond with love, with wisdom, with clarity, and the truth. Like, what is the actual truth? I think the actual truth is most of us are probably going to be just fine. That's the practical truth. But, of course, it is helpful for us not just to think about our own self, but to think about, the elderly or those with these underlying health conditions that would be, potentially a victim to this sickness. Someone who will suffer greatly from it. And so the ego will look at things just based on me, me, me. Do I have enough toilet paper for me? Do I have enough? The funny one I saw was that the ice cream and frozen pizza section was cleared out. And someone wrote online that apparently ice cream and frozen pizza is the cure for the for the coronavirus, because it's all gone off the shelves. But I just went to the store, and the store was empty where I live. And again, it's good just to be wise, to have some food to eat, of course. And maybe it's wise for us not to go out and get everyone sick or spread the sickness. Because, again, if we look at the ego only thinks about me and my desires, my cares, my needs. But with something this big, we have to think and respond universally. See, universalness and thinking in terms of universality is a quality of spiritual awakening. It's a quality of the awakened heart, that it cares. And so, I was thinking about this and saying, oh yeah, if I did get sick, it would be good if I stayed home and not just, went about my thing doing whatever I wanted and then infecting others. Like, we have to learn to work together. And so there's been so many different responses here on planet Earth. It's just been so bizarre and wild. I mean, one of the most beautiful responses I saw was in Italy, where everyone was kind of just stuck in their apartment, hunkered down, being quarantined, or however that works. And at night, everyone would come out on their balconies, and they lit candles and sang together. How about that for a response of human beings loving each other and caring, and like, despite the illness, despite the crisis, that their hearts are still shining and shining brightly and sharing this love with our neighbors. How beautiful a thing is that, versus, going to Costco and buying pallets of food, all this silliness, that's happening in the world. So anyways, the big thing whenever we come to difficulty in life is the awakened being responds. The egoic being reacts. And so this is what the opportunity here is in this moment. Difficulty really shows our true colors. Are we someone who responds with love and truth and clarity? Or are we someone who reacts out of selfishness or protection or whatever it is? And so nice to be here with you all, and seeing all your faces. One of the things I'm going to do now is I'll get to the questions here. And of course, if there's anyone here who has a live question, I'll make that a priority. And before I forget, I just want to thank everyone for their continued support of these broadcasts. And it's a beautiful thing, your generosity. So I want to just say big thank you to you, so I don't forget before I get to the questions here. Yeah. And so here's a great question from Fred. His question it concerns the relation of Advaita and Christianity. And Fred sent me a couple links that he wanted me to read read about someone's blogs or something that he read online, and these articles comparing Christianity and Advaita and the differences between these two. But he also, he also mentions that there's people, what he writes are inner religious pioneers who, like Father Bede is what I'm going to call him, in India, who's my teacher's wife actually studied with Father Bede, and Thomas Murray. Can you elaborate on this? So basically, Fred is sitting with this question of a comparison between Christianity and Advaita. So let's say basically a question could be something like, are the true teachings of Christ non-dual, or is Christianity just one of these religions where we worship God and it's very dualistic and so therefore inferior, according to someone's opinion on the internet? But Fred, I'll say this, if you deeply study the teachings of Christ and the energy of Christ, of what Christ actually is, you begin to see that the Christ is everywhere. It's in everything. Every rock, every ocean, every river, every cell, the sun, the stars, the moon. The Christ it's in the coronavirus. It's the thing that takes life, gives life. It's everyone and everything. If that isn't what non-duality is, well, I'm not certain what non-duality is. Non-dual has to be radically inclusive. Now, the way people have related to Christianity, so the people who came, how shall I say this? After the fact, like after Christ had come and gone, Jesus. And then people came along and then they studied his teachings. And when they studied his teachings, they interacted with his teachings from whatever level of consciousness they were at. And they started teaching about it. They started forming churches. That's what became the Catholic Church. But the word Catholic literally means universal. That's what it means, Catholic. Now, in 2020, in the last couple, 300 years or so, we've used the word Catholic to be a divisive thing. Catholic as opposed to Protestant, as opposed to Lutheran, or whatever it is. And all that is just nonsense. The teachings of Christ are basically what the fellow said who spoke before me. I am that. That's the teaching of the Christ. That is the radiance of life, the luminosity, the spaciousness, the vastness, the peace, the compassion. That's the teaching of the Christ. That's the teaching of Jesus, which is a personal incarnation of the Christ, a very good one. A very good one. Christ, Jesus, Christ is the one, was one of the ones who lived in total alignment with this universal grace, and yet he was completely human as well. And again, so Jesus is an incredible exemplar of non-duality in human form. And so I encourage you, Fred, not to read other people's blogs, but I encourage you to sit with this question. Why is it in your heart you feel this division between the teachings of, say, Jesus and non-duality? Do you really know the teachings of Jesus? Do you understand them? If you're tripping over something, are you tripping over the teachings of Jesus, or what someone who, heard the story of Jesus and then wrote it down in a book, and then it was translated into all these different languages, and so on and so on? Because so much of what's in the Bible is simply, what man has to offer, man's comments. People who, or maybe they were friends with Jesus, maybe they were a follower of Jesus. But that doesn't mean that's what he said and that's what he represented. And so you need to sit with this. And a great question is can you find the Christ within you? This radiance, this luminosity. Is that not what Jesus was speaking about? And is that not the non-dual fabric of reality? So you sit with it and you find out what's true for you. It's the only way. When I first came into contact with Christ, and I was young, just through calling out to Christ, I began having non-dual experiences. But when I went to Sunday school, I started having very dualistic experiences in relationship to Christianity. But as I continue to open my heart to the Christ, not to what some man or some woman says about the Christ, when I start opening up to Christ directly, I become surrendered to this non-dual fabric, this presence, which is inseparable from you or I. And so I encourage you to play with it, to sit with it, to struggle with it, as one fella called a wonderful Christian, Adam Buckle. I was speaking to him about the Bible and all the archaic language. And he said, Craig, sit down with it and just struggle with it. I thought, boy, was that a great teaching. To sit with something and just open to it. Contemplate it deeply. Don't just look for the answer in the book or from me. But you struggle with it. In the quiet space of your heart. And see what truth you find. So thanks, Fred, for the question. Here's another question. This one is from Roma, I believe. She writes, Hi, Craig. I hope you can help me. I'm stuck with this, and I'm deeply scared. I'm struggling with a shadow and letting go of old pain and trauma. So, Roma, when you say you're stuck with this, what that conveys is the way you're relating to the energy is in a frozen manner. It's kind of like if you imagine there's something in the other room that you must face. And you just stand outside the door with your hand on the doorknob. You're not opening it, you're not closing it, you're just sitting there. That's what it's like to be stuck. The energy that you have to face is on the other side. So energy, emotion, which is what shadow and of course old pain and trauma are. Emotion is energy that wants to move. Emotion literally means in motion. And if we allow emotion to be in motion, it will flow out of you. Just this is basic truth in spirituality. Energy wants to flow. Healthy energy flows. Unhealthy energy is stuck. And so if we sit there with our hand on the door, on the other side, not moving in, not really moving out, but just staring at it, the energy becomes frozen. And what most people don't realize is when you actively freeze energy, and I want you to hear me because I mean that directly. When you actively freeze energy by ignoring it, denying it, not facing it, you suffer and you prolong your suffering. And those around you suffer. And not only do you suffer and those around you suffer, but you start to bleed energy internally. And it leads to a feeling of depression or helplessness or despair. It's one of the reasons why people are buying so much right now. Because they feel this impending doom coming at them in the form of the coronavirus, And so we buy silly stuff. We start hoarding things. Look at this thing. My mom got this at the doctor, and it's like people think, okay, if I put that silly face mask on, if I have 8,000 pounds of food and toilet paper in my house, that I'm going to be safe. And egos like to have something to do. They just love to have something to do, and it just leads to craziness when we follow the path of the ego. And so I encourage you, to look at your fear. This fear of facing the trauma. And to face it. Because when you face it, you become empowered. You step out of despair and you step into empowerment. And then you get your awakened energies back of clarity. The clarity says, oh yeah, it's just old pain. It's already past. I'm big enough to feel this. I'm a goddess. Oh yes, I'm a goddess. But if you stand outside the door, actively trying to freeze the pain, you will suffer greatly. Those around you will suffer. And again, you will start to bleed energy, literally, in the form of addiction, despair, hopelessness. The list goes on. And so I encourage no one to ever use the word stuck. And instead to acknowledge that I'm an awake being. I have the power of choice. And say what you're doing out loud. I'm choosing to face this. Or I'm choosing to actively ignore it. And be stuck. And be stuck. I say that with a smile because I used to be, the king of actively ignoring things. So don't take that personally like I'm picking on you. Okay, so let's see here. Ivy writes, good evening, fellow social distancers. Yeah, good evening, Ivy. We all have space between us, don't we? That's pretty funny. It's a wonderful, wonderful time to be meeting online, So, Kate writes, Craig, my weekly kundalini question. Okay, let's see here. I was going to save kundalini questions for later, but I'll just jump right in. And this is just a side note to anyone who doesn't experience kundalini. Whenever I speak about kundalini, basically it's a teaching on dealing with overwhelming energies. So like right now, for example, we are all having the experience of the overwhelming coronavirus in whatever form that means. Maybe it means we, get stuck in a self-quarantine. Maybe it means we get really, really sick. Maybe it means we're just fine and we can't go to work and we have less money, but the whole world is going to feel this in one way or another. So Kate writes, Craig, my weekly Kundalini question. Hopefully these are helpful for others too. They are, Kate. The vast majority of questions I get are about Kundalini. With Kundalini rising powerfully, everything is exaggerated. This is true. This is true. So when we have lots of energy coming forward in our body, it feels as if everything is exaggerated. And so Kundalini is spiritual energy. And so as you get more and more spiritual energy flood your body, if you are a clear and empty vessel like the Buddha, the energy will flow through you and you will feel blissful and spacious and Satchidananda-like. Now, if you have fears or whatever it is, like Kate is writing, this includes day-to-day fears, like the coronavirus, for instance. Normally the spirit me would be able to see the situation through the eyes of grace and love, but it seems to cause the energy to erupt like a volcano without my ability to intercept my knowing. Do I have to address all my fears in the universe, or will Shakti eventually burn this all out? Much love. That's a beautiful question, Kate. So, it all depends on what your human self needs. And I'll give you an example. Sometimes when we're doing processing work, like there's things from the past which are coming forward into the light. Sometimes it is helpful for you to validate the old memories. So say, for example, you had a real traumatic childhood and mom or dad was, not kind to you. It can be real helpful just to acknowledge that, to validate that. So you validate the fear or the old pain or, yeah, that really did happen and that really was helpful. For some instances, it's very helpful to validate that. And then as you do, the energy just naturally releases. But other times, you'll find there's things in the past that you don't need to validate at all. You just have to feel the energy. And the energy of the Shakti will burn it all out. And so it all depends on what your body needs. So say, for example, if your best friend, breaks up with her husband or something, they might need to come over to your house and cry on your shoulder and for you to say, oh yeah, this is so terrible, and to really validate it. And that may be very helpful. And then they can feel the energy and then they can just grieve. But other times, if your best friend was in that same situation, she could come over to your house and you could just hug her and let her cry on your shoulder without saying anything. And so you have to learn how to listen to your body, but at the same time not be carried away by your egoic habitual nature. And so let me clarify that last point. So when we're on the path of awakening, it's all about directly experiencing what's happening within you. If your experience is telling you, I need to be validated, you validate it. If it says, I just need you to breathe, you just breathe and let it empty out the old pain. But don't let your ego get a hold of the process, because sometimes the ego will take an experience like pain and take on a character role, like the role of being a victim. I can't handle this. This is overwhelming. When's it going to end? And then if we validate that, then we actually empower the ego. So we want to look at that ego, if it goes into victim mode, and say, hey, it's okay. Relax, let go, breathe. It's okay. This too shall pass. With the coronavirus, this needs to be our mantra. This too shall pass. So wash your hands, be wise. Take good care of yourself, take care of your neighbors. This too shall pass. This too shall pass. So if China's telling the truth, which is, who knows? It seems like they went through about a two-month cycle of it, and they got to the other end of it. I think South Korea is saying about the same thing. This too shall pass. This too shall pass. It will. And that's one of the things we might just say to our fear, Kate, is this too shall pass. And so let the Shakti flow and just notice it's Shakti. It's Shakti burning up the fears, Shakti burning up the trauma and the old pain. And just let it flow. It's a beautiful thing. Okay, so here's another question. Hey, Craig, can you talk about moments like this providing the opportunity to strengthen your practice? Yeah, Michael, you just said it beautifully. Moments like this help us strengthen our practice. It's so true. And this is the way the awakened mind will look at crisis or look at difficulty. The awakened mind smiles. The awakened heart smiles, says, okay, we're all having to be a little bit uncomfortable. This is a challenge for me to be more compassionate. This is a challenge for all of humanity to stop. To stop. Press the pause button from the craziness of life. Say, okay, yeah, I'll take a couple days off work. I'll have a 14-day self-imposed, or government-imposed retreat. I'll do that. We all need a retreat from life. And so the awakened mind looks at it like Michael is looking at it, is like this makes us strong and it challenges us. It shows us what we're made of. Now, the ego doesn't like challenges. The ego likes to be in control. But again, this is life. The world is speaking to us. Literally. The planet is speaking to us. And this is one of the greatest things for global warming, is to tell everyone, quit flying all over, quit going on vacation, stay home. Stay home, work from home if you can. Reduce your impact. And so yes, times like these are opportunities for us to rise above. The ego loves habit. It loves comfort. But life is not always comfortable. And life certainly when we look at the raw aliveness of it, we see life is not some habitual dance. Life is fresh and alive and impermanent and ever-changing. And so this is a wonderful time to look and to see, how are you being? How are you acting? Are you being crazy and hoarding things and looking at your neighbors like they have the plague and everyone's going to infect you? You can't go outside ever again. Are you going into doomsday prepper mode? Or ignoring mode, or aloof mode? What's the game that you play? What's the mask that you put on when you're faced with crisis and difficulty? Do you step into the presence of the Christ? Or do you put on the ego and a big coat of armor and just fend for yourself? That's a beautiful question. Michael, a beautiful comment. Thank you. Okay, so I better move along here. Let's see here. Craig, I've been feeling intense fear of the unknown with my kundalini process, and it's also being amplified by all the chaos and the unknowns in the world right now. Can you speak about this, shed some light on this fear? Love, Justina. Yeah, Justina, that question was almost the same as Kate's, but if I feel into you, Justina, the thing I'm going to tell you is to trust the process, to open in the process, and let the wildness flow through you, the wildness of the energy. And then eventually, with patience, you'll see that it'll settle down, and there'll be this presence of mastery that you've always wanted will be shining through you, living through you, acting through you. And so, one of the things we must remember is Kundalini is the force of God. It's the intelligence of God. You can trust it. But Kundalini, it can be quite wild. It can be quite bizarre. But life is wild. Life is bizarre. Do you trust this? Do you trust life? Do you know that it's okay to surrender? Sit with these questions. Okay. Here's another one. This is from Andy. Andy writes, Craig, I went through a dark night for 3 years. The divorce, alienation from my daughter, and roaring kundalini. It was a year ago when, on top of it all, I fell severely ill with jaw inflammation and pain. Doctors weren't able to handle this, and intense fear came to the surface. I had feelings like this was too much and that God had forsaken me. Is he still here? Or has he forsaken me? And he goes on just to, if I can, speak a word about this. So Andy, the thing I'm going to invite you to open to is to hope. To hope and to healing. So hope for me is synonymous with the word evolution. Like we live in an evolving world. A world on fire with growth. Now sometimes evolution is very difficult. It's very painful. It's very confusing and disruptive. But to have hope is to acknowledge that I'm going through this currently, this crisis, this terrible thing. And that one day I will come out of this stronger, more fully awake, more fully alive, more fully compassionate. I will have a greater life. A greater life. And I don't necessarily mean materially, but a greater life in the sense that all these challenges, even loss, when you face loss with an open heart, it teaches you how indestructible you are, how unconditionally loving you are, the immense strength within you, the dignity, the clarity, what's true for you, what you value. And so when I say greater life, this is what I'm speaking about. When you face the dark night of the soul, it challenges you to grow into being a god, literally a goddess, a master. And the beautiful thing about life is if we fail, and we will, God will give us countless opportunities. Evolution gives us countless opportunities. And the hope is the belief in yourself, the belief in your truth, your strength, that you were made in the image and likeness of God, that you are not here to get your butt kicked by life and then kill yourself. Like, that's not the point of life, to just get beat up, and then to hang ourselves. That's not the point of life. The point of life is to look at those fears, to look at that noose, that we've made for ourselves, and say, no, I'm not a mere human. I'm a God man. I'm a God being. I'm a master soul, a goddess. I'm here to be a victor, not a victim. And life is trying to show you this, show you something great. So I went through all these things too, with the exception of that jaw pain that you described, Andy. And my God, I can't believe how happy I am now. The strength that arose out of that, the freedom. And yeah, it was ridiculously painful. But it's through pain that we grow. Unfortunately, that's how the stubborn learn. And I was a stubborn one. I'm not so stubborn anymore, but I used to be incredibly stubborn. Okay, so here's a question. Well, let me see here. I think someone had a live question. Okay. Let me respond to this one from Pete. Hi, Craig. In meditations the past month, I've been spontaneously pulled deeper and deeper into the heart chakra, experiencing and letting go of pain in there, and it feels like I'm circling towards something, but I don't know quite what. I'm curious what this movement is all about and how I can help foster it more daily in my daily life. Yeah, Pete, do you mean that you're circling something like literally in your direct experience of your meditation? Or do you mean like you're circling something like something is arising in your life, like a great truth? So see if you can clarify that for me, Pete. Uh, More like spiraling into the center of it during meditation, Pete? Yeah. Okay. More like spiraling into the center of it slowly. Yes. Yeah, so that's your heart chakra open, Pete. And the chakras are such interesting aspects of ourself. Each one has its own intelligence, its own heaven realm, and in this case, its own door. And so as you are called inward to meditate and focus on a particular center, sometimes you'll feel, like in, say, for example, the heart chakra, energy lighting up there. And, for some of us, we might feel energy with a blockage on top, but whatever it is, you face it. So whether it's comfortable, like a blockage means your heart is lighting up, but it's uncomfortable. But it still means your heart is telling you, will you please open the door? Will you open the door and enter me? Enter the truth of what you are. And so as you begin to open the door, like Pete is doing, sometimes the chakra will spin in one direction or another. Sometimes you'll see lights and you'll feel dizzy or like you're spinning. I used to spin and spin and spin, like inwardly and outwardly. I think I used to drive my teacher crazy. He'd tell me, Craig, quit the spinning. And but your job is simply to open to it, to see. So the spinning is the energy speaking to you. It's welcoming you forward. But again, as we spiritually awaken, we are literally waking up out of ego and then into a greater consciousness. And during that transition from one realm into the other, it can feel quite disorienting, very disorienting. And so I'll use the example of my daughter right now, who's 18. She went away to college, and now she's, they told everyone, hey, we want you to all go home, and the kids are saying, oh, okay, we were right in the middle of school, and I had this big plan, and my whole life was, based on this one school, and, they're telling all the kids to go home. And so she's coming home. She was planning on coming home in June, and she came home, March 15th. And she feels disoriented. She says, okay, what am I supposed to be doing? Should I be getting a job? Am I going to go back to that school? Are they going to let us back? And so she's kind of just like this. It's like you're stepping on a boat, you don't have your sea legs yet, and you're kind of, bobbling around, disoriented. That's normal as we transition from ego into the awakened heart, into the depth of what we are. And so I encourage you just to trust. Trust the spinning. Open into it. Allow it to be a whirlpool and just pull you down into the center. And to surrender into the love of your heart. And see what happens. So whenever there's energy within us that's waking up, spiritual energies, it'll come with all types of sensations. And the important thing is the sensations are just speaking to you. Basically saying, let go into me, surrender, feel me, experience me. And sometimes they would just call me inward and take me into a state of samadhi. And other times they would, would be very blissful, and then all of a sudden, like there'd be this deep, dark, pain within me. And so I'd go from bliss to pain, and then I'd face the pain and open to it with compassion. And then there'd be greater love and openness and strength. So I encourage you, just play with it, Pete. That's a beautiful question. Okay, let's see what else I have here. Boy, a lot of questions tonight. Okay, here's one from Uh, Miss Sterling here, she writes, Craig, I'm feeling immense pressure in the heart chakra, lots of pressure, spontaneous tears, feeling that my chest is literally being cracked open. It can be very painful and often feel there is no safety and the ground is falling out from under me. Often there are bouts of sheer terror. Yeah, so that's a fun experience, isn't it? And so when the heart opens up and you start to have this, Miss Sterling, I encourage you to reach down and literally touch the earth, touch the ground, and just notice it feels like the ground is falling out, but it's not. It feels like it, but it's not. So the ego likes to interpret thoughts and feelings as truth. But the awakened one, with the awakened heart in your case, interprets truth with truth. There's just one truth. Truth is true. Reality is reality. Reach down, touch the earth, and see. Oh, it feels like it's falling away. Like right now, it feels like the ground's falling out from under me. But I know it's not. It is, on one level, reality, but it's not on another. So the experience is it feels that way, but my body is not falling. I am here. I'm strong. I'm stable. I'm rooted. And so I encourage you, just let it flow. You're doing beautifully. Let it flow. And like you said, it can be very painful. But I will tell you, if you face this pain, it will become very beautiful. You know, the other thing she wrote is there's no safety here. Again, it feels like there's no safety. I encourage you to look around and notice that you are completely safe right here, right now. All of us are safe. We're surrounded with peace, with freedom, with spaciousness in every moment. Whether we're sitting in a room happy and healthy and well-fed and just like, thinking about terror, you are still completely safe. And even if we're, say, in the worst case scenario, if we're sitting in the hospital with a ventilator, laying on the floor because they don't have a bed for us, we're still held in peace and freedom and bliss. And luminosity in the Christ itself is here. I once found myself in a hospital and the doctor said, "You have a brain tumor, Mr. Holliday." And I was held in space and peace and freedom. I knew he was wrong, that doctor, but it was enough to, make my body quiver a little bit when someone tries to give you that diagnosis shooting from the hip. Anyway, open, 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 trust, trust, trust. And notice what is truly happening right here, right now. Are you actually in danger? Truly? Or does it just feel that way? That's the illusion of ego, is it feels, but it doesn't mean it actually is. That's a big difference if we want to be awake. So in order for that heart chakra to remain open, we have to stay with what is the truth, not what feels like the truth. Yeah, that's a huge distinction. Okay, so I think I'm doing good with the questions here. Here's one from Richard. Richard, are you here and do you have a question?
Yeah, it was just. I would love for you to just speak more on what we finished with last time. I was asking about owning your awakening, and you were speaking on what it means to, when a new state comes in a big way, what it means to embody that.
Yeah.
I just wanted to hear more about that.
Yeah, so that's a great question. Thank you, Richard. The reason a new state comes down into you, and let me clarify what that means. So when we're on the path, we don't just open to one realm. Like a lot of people say, okay, I want to open to peace, or I want to open to love, I want to open to the Christ. So I opened to the Christ, say, when I was, 7 years old, let's say that. And so I got one level, I received one level of that. And I embodied that truth for, probably 7 years until I was about 14 years old. And I embodied it to the best of my ability as a 7-year-old little boy, running around in the woods and getting in all kinds of trouble at school. But when I was 14, something changed in my consciousness. I became more open, more inquisitive, more contemplative in my nature. And I felt this whole other level of divinity just drop into me. And it was very powerful. And in fact, when it came into me, I became quite confused, quite disoriented, because the energy, it flooded my little 14-year-old frame. So I was still going through puberty and adolescence and all that. So I had that confusion. And this grace came down into me. But I knew it was something so wonderful. And so in order to embody it, I just went and got every book in the library. This was before the internet. And I studied what was happening. I studied spirituality deeply, different schools, different practices. And basically what I wanted to know was, how can I connect more deeply with this grace? How can I surrender more fully into it? This is what it means to embody something, to claim it. To claim something divine, means you surrender, you let go, and let it claim you, let it take over you. And I'll say this, as that first started happening, again, as a 14-year-old kid, I was flooded with energy, I was flooded with grace, and it went into all of my confusion. And I acted out, and I was, climbing on rooftops and, jumping cars, and just because I had all this energy flooding me, all this grace. But then at the end of the day, I would look at all the crazy nonsense I got in, the wildness where that grace had flooded my ego, and it, acted out in strange and bizarre ways, silly ways, immature ways. At the end of the night, I would look and reconnect to this grace. And again, just come back to this practice of surrendering into. And as I spent that time surrendering into it, the grace would teach me how to live. It told me to slow down. It told me to grow up a little bit. It told me this is something real. This is something profound. I want you, is what it said to me. And I said it right back. I want you. It was like a love affair that I had. And so to claim, to embody something means to have a love affair with it. Or you fall in love in the most humble way. You show up with your highest sense of self, and you let it burn out, the egoic parts, or the transitory parts, or the parts that are in the way. Just like that question about that I think it was Pete had about the heart chakra, we have to give ourselves permission in the beginning, as that new state comes in, to be a little bit disoriented. Like Miss Sterling was asking about, we have to face the pain, the blockages in the way. We have to, open to this, and be confused by it, stumble over it, to truly embody something. Because when something first comes, it gives us the grace, oftentimes at first, that'll show up in mastery. Like when we first get it, it's just like boom, and everything's so clear, and our body comes into total alignment with it, often at first. And then, we have to work for it. We have to work for it. And it's a little trick that God gives us. God will show us, okay, this is what it's like when you're fully in alignment with it. And you feel clear. It's like when people come home from retreat, they feel so clear, so awake. That's the grace of it. They're blasted with the grace. And then God says, okay, now I want you to show me you can do it. I'm going to take the training wheels off. And I need you to rise to the occasion. I need you to become a God being, a God man, a God woman, a God goddess, whatever it is we are. I need you to do this. And see, that's the great difficulty here on planet Earth. And what people don't know is there's just choirs and armies of angels who bow before us, who bow literally before us as human beings, because we're spirit who's come into the flesh. And we're inviting this flesh to join the spirit, to fall into alignment. And it's pure humility. And it's pure giving of oneself. If we want to talk about the cross, this is the cross. That's what embodiment is about, is to step into something fully, to surrender into it fully. Sometimes people get confused with embodiment or claiming your divinity being some arrogant thing that we do from some pretentious nondual philosophical place. And no one likes that. That just makes you want to, literally puke on your shoes when you see someone who had a flash of insight, then they pretend that they know something. It's such hubris, And when you do that, your heart literally closes down as soon as you become arrogant. If you claim from the ego, your heart closes. But if you claim with humility, which is something radically different, to claim with humility, you begin to realize that humility has such immense strength in it, such immense power, but it's soft power. It's disruptive power in the sense that it disrupts your egoic nature. It disrupts the collective consciousness. And when we step into humility, and we see that, like God gave us life, God gave us, so much beauty and love. And this is one of the ways we honor God. We honor life. We honor our non-dual nature. We honor the force of evolution itself through you embodying her and saying, yes, I will be a slave to you, Lord. You show me the way. But see, God wants us to be great. God does not want us to be small. If we're small, we will literally destroy ourselves and the planet. And so the world's at a time when we need to be big. Okay, that's a beautiful question, Richard. Thank you. Thank you, truly. Okay, here, let's see how I'm doing here with everyone's questions. Okay, looking good there. Okay. Here's a question from Colleen. She writes, I have much peace, but 22-year marriage with ingrained negative patterns periodically throw me back into identity. Sometimes it feels like I have to climb out of a deep hole to get back into awareness. It's not him, it's this deep sense of sadness and abandonment I have. I know he is my mirror. Yeah, so Colleen, one of the first things I want to tell you is I'm going to invite you to take that 22-year marriage and just erase it. Get out like the big eraser and get rid of the word 22-year. One of the most helpful things on the path is if we can stand in the present moment and see our pain and our beauty in the present moment. And to see your partner's pain and his beauty in the present moment. If we try to, think of it in terms of, say, 22 years, Basically, it's like the ego trying to gather up all the pain, and it's saying, that's too much, I can't handle it. Whenever the ego throws out numbers, especially in years, it's trying to build up an argument of why it's too much. And if the ego believes it's too much, then it doesn't have to be accountable. And so what I encourage you to do, Colleen, right now is to look in the mirror at yourself and see how beautiful you are, how divine you are, how innocent you are, how pure you are. And to see how there's this pain on your heart, this pain of abandonment and sadness. And to acknowledge from a place of utter innocence, utter compassion. Say, yes, I'm willing to face this abandonment and to meet it with absolute love. I'm willing to love the abandonment to death. Right here, right now. And that can look like a beautiful experience in meditation, on a yoga mat, in child's pose. It can look like going to couples therapy with your husband and saying, hey, I want to let go of this. Will you help me? I know I love you and I know you love me. And I believe in hope. I don't believe in years of trauma and the conclusion and the resentment and the pain that the trauma mind has come up with. I'm not going to believe that conclusion, that assessment. I'm going to come into my heart and love. Like this is the first time we've met. This type of love is what will save you. And the 22 years will seem like the first day. I know I've said this a lot, but I have this experience often with my wife where I look at her and I'm shocked by her beauty. And it's as if I'm seeing her for the first time, that she is this brilliant star that has come into my life. It happens actually with all my girls in my house. My 6-year-old and my 18-year-old who came home from college. I'm overwhelmed by their beauty. And I can say, from an egoic perspective, a human perspective, these girls have beat me up. All of them. They've given me such a hard time. But I don't think about that. I don't focus on that. Because if I do, then I'll just be walking around, focusing on pain and replaying pain and creating like a fossilization, literally. Like filling my body with old fossils of pain. Versus looking at these 3 women in my life saying, you're all so beautiful. I love you all so much. See your goodness, your divinity, your purity. And see, this is what makes love last. Makes love endure. Makes love love. To say that more accurately. So I hope that was helpful. Here's one last question I'd like to just get in before we're done today. This is a question from Wes. It's a really interesting question. Wes writes, Namaste, Craig. A question about raising children. In your role as a father, have you made any observations about the veiling of true nature through the growth and development process in your own children? Do you see that veiling as inevitable? Have you dealt with your role as a parent in terms of social/psychological conditioning for your own children? Hope these questions make sense and are not too personal. Wes, no, I think these are beautiful questions. I think about this every single day. What am I putting into my kids' heads? How am I influencing them? How am I repeating the sins of my father with my own children? And the beautiful thing about being, I'll make a comparison in my life, and I'm just going to say something kind of rough and off the cuff here, but as a spiritual teacher, as someone who's stepped into the path of awakening, there's so much of my energy that focuses on my/our innate perfection. Our innate perfection. But as a father, If you ever think you are innately perfect, you are in so much trouble. As a parent, I mean, to have a human body, to raise a family, you see the role, the character, the karma, the psychology, the neurosis, the habit, just moving through this form every day. Every day. And so let me be clear about that. I see it, I work with it. I'm appalled by it at times, dismayed, and also amazed, at its beauty, its strength, its wonder. To be a parent is, it's almost like the task of being a living saint. I'm not calling myself a saint, but it's a task of trying to be a saint. I want to do my best for these children because I love them so much and I give so much to them. But at the same time, we have humanity and I can remember, I was a parent, I think when I was like maybe 24, 25 years old. And the first time my father's voice came out of my mouth with all his habits, all his nonsense, his conditioning, his discipline. And, I've been parenting now for, I guess, about 20 years. And yes, Wes, I've spent 20 years, trying to grow as a parent, love more fully, be more compassionate, be more understanding, listening more, stepping back more, becoming intuitive, listening to what they're wanting. That's what I mean by intuitive. Surrendering more, reading books about nonviolent communication and love and logic parenting, and then mindful parenting and this type of parenting and that type of parenting. Oh, I've spent 20 years studying this, Wes. So absolutely, absolutely, I look at these things every single day. And if we're a parent and we don't think about this, we're asleep at the wheel. And we will just pass the sins of our fathers, sins of our mothers, sins of our ancestors on to our children, and they will suffer. And through the law of oneness, you don't want anyone to suffer. So if you see yourself acting like a fool or your kid struggling, you respond with love. You respond with love and compassion. So all great questions. Thank you all so much for this evening, for showing up. And, I'd love to say, a bunch of silly coronavirus jokes, but the big thing that I encourage us to do as we're going forward is to walk forward with truth, with clarity, with love. I think something big is happening. A lot of people truly are suffering, and let us remember that there's a lot of people suffering out there. We are being inconvenienced, so what? Let us all as humanity work together for greater good. Greater good. So thank you all for your support, your compassion, your love, sharing your hearts with me. May peace be with you all, and have a wonderful, wonderful night. Bye for now.